Obama talks about jobs at a Maryland high school. Our Wyatt Spencer is covering his remarks tonight. Pope Francis prays for 2 Italian missionary priests and a Canadian nun kidnapped in northern Cameroon. Alan Holdren has the story from Rome. Pilgrims attending this week's Angelus at St. Peter's Square get a special gift from the Pope, a gospel they can carry in their pockets. And it's been 20 years since the outbreak of the Rwandan genocide. A survivor of that horrifying experience joins us tonight. Those stories and much more just ahead on EWTN News Nightly for Monday, April 7th, 2014. Thank you so much for joining us for our first Monday broadcast. With the EWTN News Nightly team, I'm Brian Patrick. We begin this evening looking at news now. It could be a major break in the hunt for the missing Malaysia Airlines Flight 370. A Malaysian official calls it the most promising lead in the search. 2 different ships have detected the sound of pings in the Indian Ocean, and it might just be in time. Tomorrow marks the 1 month point since Flight 370 vanished. The beacons on the plane's black boxes only last about a month. Our Jason Calvi has the story tonight.
This Australian ship called Ocean Shield is towing a U.S. Navy sound detector. It picked up the first signal Saturday, lasting 2 hours and 20 minutes. The sound was lost. The ship turned around and picked up more pings that lasted 13 minutes.
The most promising lead we have had.
Malaysia's defense and acting transport minister spoke to the press today.
We are cautiously hopeful that there will be a positive development in the next few days, if not hours.
Last week, we brought you inside the National Transportation Safety Board's accident lab. Here's what a beacon sounds like with special equipment. The sounds heard aboard the Ocean Shield were similar, pings about 1 second apart. Searchers are scouring the area where the sounds were heard. Chinese television is reporting a Chinese search team detected sound on Saturday, 345 miles from the Australian ship. Australia's Prime Minister Tony Abbott urged caution.
We are hopeful, but by no means certain. This is the most difficult search in human history.
The Ocean Shield is back looking for more signals, but so far today, no success. Tomorrow is the day the black box's beacons could begin to fade out.
And a U.S. Navy robotic sub is ready to take photos and figure out what's down there. But first, searchers want to get a better sense of where the signals are coming from. The pings, if they are indeed from Flight 370, would point to the flight data recorder and the cockpit voice recorder. And Brian, that could answer the question, what happened to the people on board?
So how long, Jason, before we know if those sounds are actually coming from those black boxes?
Well, the head of the search says it could take days, Brian. If that U.S. robotic sub goes down, it goes down for about 16 hours and then another 4 hours to come back to the surface.
All right, thank you, Jason Calvi. And some of the other stories our EWTN News Nightly team has been covering in today's world. The Supreme Court has decided not to hear a case involving a photographer who refused to work at a gay commitment ceremony. The owners of Elaine Photography said they couldn't take the photos. They said to do so would violate their deepest held beliefs. Now that the U.S. High Court won't hear the appeal, the New Mexico Supreme Court's ruling against the owners stays in place. Well, some emotional testimony from Oscar Pistorius at his murder trial today. The South African track star took the witness stand and apologized to the family of the girlfriend he shot and killed last year. Listen to some of his message to the victim's family.
There's not a moment, and there hasn't been a moment since this tragedy happened that I haven't thought about your family. I wake up every morning, you're the first people I think of, the first people I pray for.
Pistorius faces 25 years or more in prison for premeditated murder if he's convicted. He claims he was trying to protect his girlfriend from an intruder. India starts voting today in the world's largest election. With 814 million eligible voters, India will vote in stages over the next 5 weeks. The results are expected to be announced May 16th. The ruling Congress Party candidate for Prime Minister is Rahul Gandhi, who is running against opposition leader Narendra Modi. India is the world's most populous democracy. Britain's Prince George is making his first international trip today. Prince William, Duchess Kate, and baby Prince George arrived in New Zealand this morning, beginning a 3-week tour of New Zealand and Australia. They were welcomed by locals who braved the wind and the rain and the fog. The royals plan to enjoy local wine tasting and meet Lord of the Rings director Peter Jackson during this trip. The landslide that ravaged a Washington state community has now claimed at least 33 lives. 30-year-old Billy Spillers has been listed as missing, but now the county medical examiner confirms that he died. There are 10 others still missing after that March 22nd landslide hit the town of Oso, Washington. President Obama is shifting his focus back to the economy and job creation this week. Today, the White House announced millions of dollars in grants to help students prepare for jobs that will be in demand in the future. Our Wyatt Spencer is at the Maryland High School where the president made his announcement today. Wyatt?
Yes, Brian, President Obama announced more than $100 million in grant money for 24 schools, including Bladensburg High School. Earlier today, the president spoke here to a crowd of students saying that the grant money will help educators to develop and to test a new curricula, ultimately to help students to compete in the job market against places like China and India.
That's who you're competing against. Now, I'm confident you can match or exceed anything they do, but we don't do it by just resting on what we've done before. We've got to outwork and out-innovate and out-hustle everybody else. We've got to think about new ways of doing things.
President Obama is hoping Bladensburg High School's Youth Career Connect program will become a model for public schools nationwide. The program puts students with community partners to get real-world experience. The grant will also help expand the school's Health and Biosciences Academy, which prepares more students for the ever-growing healthcare field. It's that hands-on experience, the students say, makes a difference in deciding where to work or what to study.
We have so many programs that help benefit every type of career that you want to go to. For me, for example, I know that I'm in the nursing program, but I'm also in ROTC. So that means that gives me 2 options coming out of high school.
Educators also hope to instill hard-working values that will pay off years down the line. The principal, Aisha Mahoney, says the president's visit and the grant money confirms that their school is on the right track.
It just filled me with pride as I heard President Obama speak about those 4 goals and how the students have to be competitive, that's right here in our vision. That's our mission, and we're carrying that out right now.
The president is expected to talk more about the economy and jobs tomorrow at the White House. From there on Wednesday, he travels to Texas for a couple of fundraisers as well as a memorial service for the victims of the recent Fort Hood shooting. Brian.
A controversy has erupted after Mozilla CEO Brendan Eich resigned last week over his support of traditional marriage in California. Eich was CEO of Mozilla for only a few days before resigning after an outrage over a $1,000 contribution he made in 2008 in support of California's ban on gay marriage. Mozilla employees and other companies like OkCupid, a pro-gay marriage website, put pressure on Mozilla to get rid of Eich, so he resigned. Now, Eich's abrupt departure has stirred up debate about the fairness of forcing out a highly qualified technology executive over his personal views. Joining us by satellite from New York is James Taranto, a member of the Wall Street Journal's editorial board and editor of the OpinionJournal.com. Here in our Washington, D.C. studio, Hans van Spakovsky, a senior legal fellow at the Heritage Foundation, is with us. James, you wrote an op-ed about this in the Journal. Now, we live in a democracy. How does a successful guy like Eich face the kind of pressure he faced for supporting something he believes in a democracy?
Well, this is a viewpoint that is now a dissident viewpoint in liberal places like California, and particularly in Silicon Valley, where the prevailing attitude is very socially liberal and very pro-gay. So, you have this prevailing view that we have to be tolerant and we have to enforce tolerance with great intolerance. And so, OkCupid, the dating website, started a boycott to put pressure on Mozilla, and Mozilla basically caved in, and he retired. He resigned.
Hans, the people who support this disclosure, about how we make political contributions, say that it curbs corruption. But how does that apply to a referendum? I can see it maybe applying to a candidate, but a referendum like Proposition 8?
Well, it doesn't apply. I mean, you can make that argument, as you say, for candidates, because what can candidates do if they're elected? They can pass legislation that might specifically benefit a contributor. But you don't have that situation with referenda because those are voted on by all of the voters of the state. In California, several million. So it's really an invasion of the privacy of the donor, and there's no public policy reason for doing that.
Do you guys think that this kind of uproar would have happened if he were on the other side of this issue?
Well, no, but we should all remember that Eich is only one of the latest victims of this. The Heritage Foundation has done a study in which we've looked at many supporters of Proposition 8 out in California who lost their jobs, were the subject of intimidation and harassment, vandalism of their properties, and threatened boycotts of their businesses because of their donations. That did not happen on the other side of this.
James,
Justice Clarence.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, Justice Clarence Thomas, in what was a dissenting opinion from part of the Citizens United case, where he was the only dissenter arguing against these sorts of disclosure rules, had extensive evidence from the Proposition 8 debate, including a case in which a woman donated $100, which is the minimum you're allowed to donate and have to disclose under California law, and was harassed at her place of business, a family restaurant that she managed. But Hans is quite right. This only goes on one side of the debate, on the supposedly tolerant side.
Mozilla put out a statement saying it believes in equality and freedom of speech, and yet it seems like Eich is denied his freedom of speech here.
Well, yeah, in fact, that statement was, I thought at first it might be a spoof, because all throughout it, a chairwoman of Mozilla talks about the importance of free speech and inclusion, and yet everything that she and Mozilla has done is the opposite of that. They obviously don't believe in free speech. They don't believe in inclusion of anyone whose views vary from that of the liberal orthodoxy that, as James was saying, prevails in Silicon Valley.
James, what do you think this means for future executives? Do they risk losing good jobs because of their personal beliefs?
Well, I certainly wouldn't. If I were in that line of work, I would not make any political donations. I would keep my politics to myself. I think it has a chilling effect on participation. And maybe there's a case to be made for disclosure of very large donations, so that if a company is bankrolling an initiative to the tune of millions of dollars, but this is $100 donations and above. I donated $1,000. It didn't make the difference between Proposition 8 passing and not. If you look at what happened as a result, he clearly had his rights violated by that disclosure requirement.
All right, James Taranto joining us from New York tonight. We appreciate you. And Hans van Spakovsky, we appreciate you being with us from the Heritage Foundation here in Washington, D.C.
Thanks for having us.
Coming up, Pope Francis gives pilgrims pocket gospels at Sunday's Angelus, encouraging them to pray for their enemies. And 20 years ago, the Rwanda genocide began. One survivor's reflections on those horrific times and hope for her native land's future just ahead. Welcome back to EWTN News Nightly for this Monday, April 7th. I'm Brian Patrick. Pope Francis is praying tonight for 2 Italian priests and a Canadian sister kidnapped in Cameroon last week. Our Rome correspondent Alan Holdren is at the Italian Ministry of Foreign Affairs with the story. Alan, do we know anything about the whereabouts of these missionaries?
That's right, Brian. I'm right outside the Italian Ministry for Foreign Affairs, where they're taking care of this case. They're actually staying quiet on the issue because they don't want to compromise the release of these 3. We do know that the 2 priests are from the north of Italy, and the sister is an 80-year-old religious sister from Canada. Now, all of these 3 were working in the northern diocese of Marua, which is in the nation of Cameroon in Central Africa. Now, this is very close in proximity to the Nigerian border. I was speaking with the Africa specialist from the Vatican's missionary news agency today, and he said this is possibly at the root of the problem. Local authorities suspect that the Islamist militia from Nigeria called Boko Haram might be to blame for this. They haven't taken responsibility, and they haven't asked for ransom, which is considered to be the main motive for these kidnappings. Now, other kidnappings have taken place in the last couple of years. For these priests in particular, the reason that they were visiting the sister was that later that day they were going to be meeting with other priests from the diocese to talk about security and safety concerns. Brian?
All right, Alan Holdren reporting from Rome, and along with the Holy Father, we keep those missionaries in our prayers tonight. Tens of thousands of people got a gift from Pope Francis at this week's Angelus. Pocket-sized copies of the Gospel were handed out to the crowds. The Pope encouraged those gathered to read them daily. Claudina Potts, a pilgrim from Poland, says it'll come in handy.
I'm just trying to find my way now, so I hope so that it might help me.
The Pope did ask for something in return. He told those in the crowd that in exchange for the gift, they should perform an act of charity. He even gave the example of praying for an enemy. Also during the Angelus, the Pope marked the 20th anniversary of the outbreak of the genocide in Rwanda. Nearly 800,000 Rwandans were killed in that tragedy. Joining us now is Immaculée Ilibagiza, a native of Rwanda who now lives in New York City. Immaculée, it's so good to have you with us. You were only 23 when that genocide started 20 years ago. You go back to Rwanda now, don't you?
I do every year, actually, with a group of Americans here.
How have things changed there in these 20 years?
Amazing, amazing. I mean, the whole country as a whole have rised up, so it have progressed a lot economically. I remember, for example, we used to have like 2 universities in the country. We have more than 20 universities after 20 years. So it's amazing, yeah.
What about the tensions between the Hutus and the Tutsis? I understand you can't even mention ethnicity in Rwanda anymore.
Yeah, you know, before we used, anywhere we used to go, we would show identity cards to show who you are. It was meant for the sole purpose to discriminate you. So now everyone is Rwandan. It's a great thing. No one is going to discriminate you because we look alike. So it's a beautiful thing.
It's a major change. To what do you attribute that to?
I attribute to good leaders we have. They really have done great work. And I attribute it as a Catholic to the Blessed Mother, Our Lady of Kibeho, who appeared 12 years before the genocide and have told us, if this happened, still this country will rise again. So people are eager to change, they're praying, they don't want what happened to happen again. So it's almost like crime is almost non-existent in Rwanda. Everyone wants to work towards peace.
It sounds almost too good to be true. Do you think that this can last?
It will last. Naturally, Rwandans are good people. We have a huge sense of hospitality. I mean, I went through it myself. I can't believe the evil that happened, and so quickly. It's like hell have just come and moved to Rwanda.
You hid for more than 3 months from this atrocity. How did you survive that, and how did you keep your hope alive?
You know, I grew up as a Catholic, I grew up as a Christian. I knew prayer is powerful. So I had a rosary my father gave me. I held on to this and I prayed. I remember reminding Jesus, you said those who ask, they shall receive. You said knock the door. I am knocking. You won't leave me here. But slowly I realized also, actually maybe those who died went in a better place. For us, it wasn't easy to survive, but I really held on to God. To every promise he said, you said to ask, I knocked the door, I begged. And some people, like my brother, one of my brother who was killed, he wrote to me a letter the day before they killed him. He was actually telling me, if I die, don't worry, I am going to heaven. So many people were very accepting to die, but somehow, not once I wanted to die. I just begged God, keep me, keep me.
Well, God apparently wanted you to live. You're now an American citizen for about a year now, right?
I am.
And those of us who enjoy the freedom of America, having lived what you have lived through, what does that mean to you?
It means the world. I mean, for the past 7 years, I have been working, you know, here and in America, speaking and sharing my story and seeing how people are inspired and how kind people are. So it is such a good thing to be able to say, I'm one of you, and I can take you home to Rwanda and bring you home again to America. So it's such a great joy to be here.
All right. Remind us of the name of your book.
Left to Tell. And I wrote more. I have 7 more books.
Wonderful. And they're available in the EWTN Religious Catalog. Yeah. Immaculée, thank you for joining us, and our prayers are with you and your family and your people.
Thank you so much.
Well, Pope Francis is praising church workers in Africa who promote chastity in the prevention of HIV/AIDS. He made his comments while speaking to bishops from Tanzania. He praised church healthcare workers in Africa who care for those with HIV/AIDS and, quote, all who strive diligently to educate people in the area of sexual responsibility and chastity. Parishioners at a parish near Rome heard a homily from the Pope himself this Sunday. Pope Francis visited St. Gregory, the parish south of Rome, the Holy Father preaching about the importance of detaching from sin through the power of Christ's healing grace. Sunday's visit was Pope Francis' 6th pastoral visit to a parish in his Diocese of Rome. Pope Francis is giving his support to the Vatican Bank to keep operating as it strives to meet international best banking practices. The bank has been caught up in money laundering probes. It's headquartered in this tower inside the Vatican. The Vatican says the bank's services help the Pope in his mission as universal pastor, but it stressed that the Vatican Bank must follow the Pope's orders on, quote, transparency, supervision, and financial information. Up next, UK meets UConn in North Texas tonight for the NCAA Basketball Championship. Veteran sports journalist Tony Burke sets the stage. And he may have been short in stature, but Mickey Rooney was once a Hollywood giant. We'll remember this film icon who passed away this weekend. You're watching EWTN News Nightly. Good evening, I'm Brian Patrick, and the field has now been narrowed down to just 2 teams. Tonight they meet in Arlington, Texas for the NCAA Basketball Championship and, of course, bragging rights until next spring. Should be a great game. Kentucky and Connecticut are very evenly matched. Neither were expected to get this far in the tournament, although both won a championship in the past few years. UConn fans were elated when the Huskies knocked off #1 seed Florida Saturday. Of course, the UK faithful never gave up on Big Blue. They partied in the streets after the Wildcats' last-minute win over Wisconsin. It's UK and UConn tonight in Arlington. Winner takes all. Tony Burke is with us, veteran sports journalist, now the Vice President of Communications for Catholic Charities here in the Archdiocese of Washington. Thanks for coming back, Tony.
Thanks, Brian. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
When you were with us last, you and many others picked the Florida Gators to take it all. Did Florida get overconfident? Was UConn too good? What happened Saturday?
UConn's on the same role they were in 2011, where they are just playing their best ball, and they suffocated the Florida guards and totally took them out of their game. You know, you thought the roll was on when Florida jumped up 16-4. You thought, well, okay, that's what's supposed to happen. And then UConn just did what they've done all tournament. Kevin Ollie got them playing some defense. They made a few shots, and then they just took over the ball game.
And Florida hadn't lost in 30 games, but the last 2 losses were to UConn.
Right, and there are just times in a year that the better team just can't beat a certain team. And UConn this year was Florida's kryptonite, I guess.
Well, Kentucky started rated #1 at the beginning of the season. They fell off the charts, but they came back and they found ways to win games like they did against Wisconsin.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what, Big Blue, they have been the cardiac kids of the entire tournament. Aaron Harrison has hit the biggest shots of his life as a freshman. 3-pointer against Michigan, a 3-pointer against Wisconsin. He did it against Louisville, although not as much dramatic fashion, but gave him the final lead. The kids have found a way to win, and you don't usually see that when it's a bunch of freshmen and sophomores, but boy, they are so talented.
Yeah, they're called Calipari's one-and-doners. They're playing 1 year of college ball before they go to the NBA. Do you see that as a trend now?
I do, and it's unfortunate. I remember in the years when I was growing up, and I won't date myself, but you knew the players. You know, by year 3, by year 4, you kind of started to root for certain teams because you liked certain players. That doesn't happen anymore. You know, it was even worse when kids were going from high school and making the jump. LeBron James and Dwayne Wade and all the, well, Dwayne played at Marquette, but LeBron when he went to the pros. Now you've got guys that just come in for 1 year, and it'll be the same this year for Kentucky. Calipari's already reloaded for next year, so it's not going to be a problem for Kentucky, but I don't think it's good for the game. I really don't, because you can't latch on to certain players and certain teams like you used to when you were a kid.
All right, so let's pick the winner for tonight. You got the Huskies against the Wildcats. Who do you like and why?
Well, I love Kevin Ollie. I covered him when I was in Cleveland. You knew he was going to be a great coach because he played basketball with such intelligence. However, if you look at talent, I think Kentucky is showing why they were the preseason #1. If they can shut down the big 3 of Connecticut in Napier, Boatwright, and Daniels, I think Kentucky will end up winning the ball game. So I have Kentucky in a close game, but I have Kentucky winning.
Do you see it as close as the Kentucky-Wisconsin game?
I do not. I think Kentucky will kind of spread it late in the game. They'll kind of take over and win the ball game. Who knows? Kevin Ollie might have a couple tricks up his sleeve to keep this thing close, but Kentucky's so big, so athletic, so talented, they end up winning the ball game.
Should be fun. Did you realize that this is National Beer Day, by the way?
I did not, but I should have known that.
Yeah. Thanks for being with us, Tony. In fact, many basketball fans will have a few beers tonight watching tonight's big game. Beer is really important to the economy of the city of Milwaukee. Some people there are trying to bring a beer-making company back to its roots. Remnants of Pabst Brewing are everywhere in Milwaukee. The Pabst Mansion, the Pabst Theater, and the now partially renovated brewery complex.
Milwaukee made this beer what it is. You know, when you look at the can, it's right on the can.
The beer, known mostly for its blue ribbon can, started in Milwaukee by Frederick Pabst in 1844, but its headquarters moved years ago.
You know, when I think about Pabst being anywhere else but Milwaukee, it just doesn't make sense.
But Susie Siedelman and others here want to bring Pabst home after hearing reports the company was for sale. She helped start a petition asking Los Angeles owner Dean Metropoulos to give Milwaukee first right of sale. So far, they have about 1,300 signatures. The Department of City Development says Pabst would be welcome to return to Milwaukee.
We have not seen the details of the plan, so we look forward to discussing that with people who are proposing it.
There's no word on an asking price, but it would likely be in the hundreds of millions, if not more. Susie Siedelman says they would raise money through some form of crowdfunding, but they haven't decided exactly yet. Jim Hartle bought Pabst Administrative Office Building and Bar and says he doesn't think they'd have any problem raising the cash.
We get about 1,000 people a week on our tours, and they come from all over the Midwest, all over the country, all over the world. And they've seen this, and when they hear about this, they're going to say, I want to buy a share of stock.
This isn't about beer for us. You know, this isn't about creating another opportunity in Milwaukee for people to drink a local beer. We have lots of really good local beer here. This is about investing in the city of Milwaukee.
So far, Pabst has no comment on the effort, but the group plans to officially send the letter to Metropoulos soon. And finally tonight on EWTN News Nightly, Hollywood and all movie fans are remembering an iconic American actor tonight. Mickey Rooney died this weekend. He was 93, and his fans are reacting.
Actually, it makes me really sad. I grew up on black and white television. One of my first movies I can remember was National Velvet, where he was a co-star in that, and that was one of my favorite movies all growing up.
Mickey Rooney was the best. He was like, he used to go with the Little Rascals back in the days. I could tell you about Mickey Rooney, all the little games, all the little plays that he did. He was a very good actor back then.
He was a short guy, but he surely stood tall. He was Hollywood's top box office draw in the late 30s to early 40s. You might remember him from the movie Boys Town with Spencer Tracy as Father Flanagan. He died at his North Hollywood home this weekend. Be sure to like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter and catch us again on EWTN's YouTube page. For all of us here at EWTN News Nightly, I'm Brian Patrick. We'll see you tomorrow. Thanks for watching tonight. Good night and God bless.